So highlights for 2025 are fortunately multiple. It's been a very busy year, but also a very productive year. And a very productive year in a very important way, and that is Peace Parks advancing on its concept of integrated co-management. In other words, a partnership between government and Peace Parks as organization and multiple other stakeholders to manage parks. And it's important to note that this model is completely unique. There is no equivalent of a model in Africa where a park is managed by a government and an NGO, but also including communities and local government and private sector and individuals recognized within the country, as prominent citizens. So what has happened in Malawi, the Nyika-Vwaza Trust, it's the name of the two parks, Nyika and Vwaza, was created. And it's called the Nyika-Vwaza Co-management Trust because it's a co-management model between Peace Parks and the government of Malawi. So you blend a high level of ownership by local government, local communities, local Malawian NGOs managing a park with a new entity that you create to ensure that you bring best practice of private sector into the management. So you look at all the elements that you would require in any normal company, like efficiency, transparency, and also delivery of targets and objectives, and most importantly, accountability by everybody involved. So for me, that's probably one of the biggest highlights in the year, the actual registration of this trust, this co-management trust, and then the appointment of its first CEO and the management team. And in line with this very important development, we also had the first director appointed of the Mana Pools Conservation Trust. Now, Mana Pools is the flagship park in Zimbabwe. It's a recognized World Heritage Site. It's been designated as a World Heritage Site already as far back as 1984. And the Zimbabwe government and Peace Park signed a 20-year agreement where we are taking hands to jointly develop and manage this iconic landscape. And again, there's a special purpose entity being created, a trust. And again, there's a head of this trust being appointed, and that head of this trust was appointed this year. And together with the Zimbabwe government, we are now in the process of investing in key operational aspect that we could look after the welfare of the staff in this landscape to improve the effectiveness of management. And that journey has commenced this year, and multiple interventions has taken place. So it's very much in the beginning of this journey, but it's also very encouraging that the government of Zimbabwe and Zimbabwe Parks and Wildlife Authority have embraced this model to the extent that it has, and that this new governance model is taking flight in partnership with Peace Parks Foundation in Zimbabwe. Africa's population is growing, so to address that directly is to work with communities. And to work with communities to see how can you promote coexistence between people and nature. As simple as that. One of the best vehicles that we've discovered that can do that at scale is carbon financing. This year, we have made phenomenal progress in two large community-based forest carbon programs. One in Zambia, together with the Barotse establishment, and Biocarbon Partners as the carbon developer, to unlock 1.9 million hectares of forest to be protected by local communities. And it's done through selling carbon credits on the voluntary market and using the revenues to finance the livelihoods of communities and to finance forest rangers to look after forests. In the same approach, another landscape, Great Limpopo in Mozambique, between three national parks, where it's more focused on financing protected areas in order for the protected areas to conserve its forests, and also supporting communities outside. And this is a project of 2.2 million hectares of protected areas, plus another 500,000 to 700,000 hectares. It's still in discussions with communities of communal land that will come under this program. So in total, about 2.9 million hectares of indigenous forests being protected through this program. So two really exciting and enormous scale-wise programs that are really in partnership with communities to promote coexistence with nature. There's been also a very exciting development in Malawi where President Chakwera of Malawi launched a water scheme called the Nyika-Vwaza water scheme, and it's named after these two parks, and it's feeding water from this highland plateau national park, Nyika, which has over 2,000 millimeters of rain per annum, and it sort of acts as a sponge to provide consistent water flow to the people and to the Lake Malawi. And this year, with the current support of the German government, this scheme was open where it provided water on tap to gravity-fed water, by the way, so there's no pumps involved, to 18,500 people downstream outside of the national park. And for me, that's a wonderful example of how important protected areas are for the well-being and for the survival of people. If we don't have these natural reservoirs of biodiversity and providing water and oxygen and pollen, etc., medicines, we as humankind are in deep trouble. And to have this incredible park called Nyika providing up to 10% of all the fresh water for Lake Malawi, and there's about, at the latest count, 10 million people directly dependent on this lake just on the Malawi side alone, is such a critically important intervention, and so it's extremely encouraging, and it's extremely rewarding to see something like this, where there's this direct benefit from protected areas, promoting coexistence between people and nature, where people benefit directly and realize how important it is to look after their national park in order to have clean, potable water. In Mozambique and in many other countries in Southern Africa, Peace Parks has reintroduced wildlife to restore it. A vital part of the program to restore protected areas is by bringing back wildlife that used to occur there. In total, over the last 20 years, we've reintroduced about 18,500 animals, and those animals have grown to over 100,000 animals in the wild. There's another park in Mozambique where we are on the verge of signing a long-term partnership agreement, and part of that is to start restoring the park. It's called Banhine National Park. It's like the little Okavango Delta in Botswana. It's got these massive wetlands, although they dry up completely, but for 5 to 7 years at a time, you've got these massive water bodies. So it's a very interesting park. I think it's a forgotten park, and we're on this journey now, having supported the government of Mozambique to build capacity, to invest in infrastructure, and the next logical step is to bring back wildlife. So this year, based on the successes of Maputo National Park, where the population have increased 6-fold, we actually had surplus animals in this park. I had to move it between one park in Mozambique to Banhine National Park in Mozambique. It's a huge park, and it will take, it's a 20-year project, but at least the first critical step was taken in 2025. Probably the highlight that stood out for me for 2025 was the further reintroduction of critically endangered black rhino to Zinave National Park in Mozambique. Now, why is this important? Well, first of all, there are about 5,000 black rhino left in the world. They are critically endangered, and there's no viable breeding population of black rhino in Mozambique for the last 50 years. And with this latest translocation of additional 10 black rhino to the Zinave National Park, donated by the 𝐶𝐬𝐿 Wildlife, a conservation authority in South Africa, with financial support of the UK People's Postcode Lottery, we managed to secure a further 10 black rhino. There were already black rhino in the park, but they weren't enough to make it a viable breeding population. So with this further 10 that we introduced, it took it to a level where scientists says now you've got a viable breeding population. The biggest highlight, personally, for me and for Peace Parks is the journey of Maputo National Park. So Maputo National Park, Peace Parks have been involved in this park now for 19 years, since 2006. And it was a very, very structured journey from where the park was only existing on paper to where it was proclaimed a national park, to what happened this year in July, where UNESCO designated Maputo National Park as a World Heritage Site and it's now been recognized as one of the most biodiverse, rich places on Earth. 2025 has been a phenomenal year, for these aspects that I've mentioned, and it sort of lays just another step up this ladder of progressing to our ultimate objective of large landscape conservation in coexistence with people. All of this requires incredibly hard work, sound partnerships, dedicated, trusting donors, and incredible staff. And we've seen a compound growth of 17% for the last decade in Peace Parks Foundation, and I believe it's possible because of this combination of all of these ingredients. So without people, that's going to be impossible, and without this incredibly dedicated, professional, hardworking staff of Peace Parks Foundation, it will be impossible. So just to, from my side, to really thank every single staff member for playing their part, and the board, of course, have been incredible, and also the donors have been incredible. Our founder, Dr. Rupert, was always very fond of saying, conservation without money is just a really, really nice conversation. So without money, without generating revenue through business development, or without getting support from, very generous community, we simply will not have a future for nature in Africa and coexistence with people.